Your breath freezes before it even fogs the air. The blizzard beats the roof like a war drum, yet a scruffy villager named Rowan lounges beside a glow you can't even see. How, in a world with no radiators or smart thermostats, is Rowan's cottage hotter than your modern apartment? Imagine winter not as a festive postcard but as a 6-month siege, each gust determined to steal the warmth from your bones. We picture the Middle Ages as a frozen purgatory haystack huts buried in drifts, families shivering in silence. But what if the soot-stained folk of Frostford had cracked a code we've long forgotten? Hidden beneath their straw and smoke lay an engineering mastery more elegant than any touchscreen panel. Follow or subscribe the channel and step with me into a world where heat was a treasure wrestled from earth, wood, and wit. First, let's pry apart the very walls that sheltered them. A 21st century contractor would faint at the sight, a spidery lattice of hazel rods daubed with Maya brew. Ellen the Thatcher mixed it by Moonlight River clay for heft, chopped oat straw for flex, river sand for bite, and a scandalous scoop of cow dung for stick. When the slurry cured beneath the pale sun, it hardened like granite yet breathed like skin, inhaling damp by day and exhaling it by night, balancing moisture the way lungs balance oxygen. Day after day, the central hearth Rowan's pride roared at the heart of the single room. No marble mantle, just a shallow bowl of cobbles sunk into the earth. Sparks swirled upward, not into a chimney, there was none, but into a smoky halo beneath the thatch. "Keep the smoke in, lad," Rowan told his son Bram. "It's warmer than a king's crown." The haze-soaked rafters slid down clay-lined walls and stored heat everywhere it touched. Architects now chase something called thermal mass. Frostford built it by accident and called it supper. While a cauldron of barley and turnips bubbled above the flames, its iron belly banked heat like a vault. Steam softened the dry winter air, and the onion scent wrapped the family like a blanket. When the embers waned, those walls exhaled their saving-slow radiant warmth that stopped the indoor chill from crashing to deadly street lows. Of course, smoke was more than warmth. It was a chemical soldier. Creosote seeped into clay and thatch, poisoning mold, blinding beetles, and banishing fleas. The very fumes we call toxic were their silent guardian angels. Why place the hearth dead center? Picture a campfire frozen in stone. A wall-hugging fireplace wastes half its blaze on the bricks behind it. Rowan's hearth radiated in a perfect ring 360 degrees of life. Whether little Maeve played with a goose feather or grandmother Tyra mended baskets, everyone basked in the same golden glow. Even the dirt beneath bare feet warmed like sun-kissed sand, saving its heat for midnight. Cooking, heating, lighting one process, 3 miracles. Bubbling stew thickened the air with humidity, sparing throats from smoke-crackled dryness. When the meal finished, Rowan shoveled aside shimmering ash, slid flat dough into the cozy crater, and let residual heat bake supper cakes crisp as autumn leaves. Not a splinter of fuel was wasted, not one calorie of labor squandered. The family's evenings existed inside a trembling aura of firelight. Shadows of willow baskets danced on clay walls like sprites. Jokes flew faster than sparks. "Bram, your nose is so red the geese think it's an ember." Laughter, warmth, and wood smoke fused until memory itself smelled of pine resin. When eyelids drooped, Rowan blanketed the coals with ash not to extinguish, but to lull them. Under that grey quilt, embers smoldered like secret rubies, ready to flare at dawn with a single breath. Letting the hearth burn out freely overnight was considered a sin against common sense and against the aching backs that harvested the fuel. Rowan's ritual never failed. Once the children slept, he scattered a thin quilt of ash over the bed of coals and whispered, "Rest, little dragons." The embers slumbered till dawn. A single puff and a twist of reed kindling woke them no waste, no scramble for fresh logs. By modern metrics, these methods look crude, yet they reveal a wisdom we're racing to relearn. The hut's low door forced every visitor to duck, keeping warmth penned in. Its steep thatch shrugged snow yet trapped rising heat. Even the goats played their part, bedded behind a wattle screen and exhaling gentle warmth that saved a bundle of sticks each night. Humor thrived amid hardship. When a snow squall battered the shutters, old Tyra cackled, "Winter's outside begging for porridge again." Bram once traced the smoke swirl with a goose feather, came away soot, beaked, and set the room roaring with laughter. Survival meant turning danger into story and scarcity into sport. If you could stand unseen in that hut at midnight, you'd smell pine, tar, peat, and wool. You'd hear the walls sigh as they breathed out stored heat. Few castles ever felt so alive. Even the packed earthen floor conspired, drinking the hearth's gift by day and handing it back before dawn, proof that every inch of the dwelling, from smoky rafters to humble dirt, united in a silent pact against the cold. So next time your thermostat pings a complaint, think of Rowan and his ash blanket dragons. Warmth, he would say, isn't bought, it's tended. That is why letting flames roar unchecked until they died, letting the hearth burn out freely overnight, was judged a folly greater than spilling ale at midwinter. Wasting a single ember was like pitching a sack of flour into a river, you just didn't do it. Rowan's neighbors joked that an untended flame could cost a man his soul and his roof in the same night, because a thatched cottage burns faster than gossip spreads at market. Imagine the nightly ritual. Each dusk, when St. Alfred's bell tolled curfew, a word born of the Norman phrase couvre-feu, cover the fire, Rowan bowed before his hearth with the focus of a surgeon. He did not snuff the blaze, he embalmed it. First, he pinched out the choicest coals with lightning, struck hazel tongue soak, and beech hearts glowing red as dragon eyes. Softwood embers, liable to fizzle, were cast aside. He raked the keepers into a tight hill and buried them beneath a bone-grey quilt of ash, 3 fingers thick. Too thin, the coals would feast on air and die. Too fat, they would suffocate. Get it just right and the fire slid into a trance, smouldering at 200 degrees while radiating a gentle warmth that never spat a spark. The trick paid off at dawn. Rather than fumble with flint in brittle darkness, Rowan whisked away the ash curtain to reveal embers blinking like rubies, a twist of dry moss, 1 puff of breakfast flame. Tyra called the rite banking the dragons, and every child learned the steps long before they could read. Not all learned though. When Moira Tebbins once skipped the ash blanket, a stray spark set her roof alight before cockcrow. The charred beams still serve as Frostford's winter parable. Respect the dragons or they'll fly free. But hearth dragons weren't the homestead's only furnace. In Northold's colder shires, cottages stretched into long houses, thatch sweeping over people on one end and livestock on the other. Modern noses gag, medieval logic applauded. An ox digests hay like a mobile brewery, throwing off nearly a kilowatt of heat. Add larkspur the cow, 3 sheep and 2 pigs, and the stable half pulsed with animal wattage. A thin daub wall soaked up that biological bonfire. By bedtime, its clay felt hot to the touch, so the family shoved their straw mattress against it. Bram liked to swear he could feel the ox burp through the mud. Under the hooves, deep litter brewed compost warmth. Typhus the pig rooted and turned the mix, acting as unpaid janitor. Village children rhymed, ox breath, pig snort cold falls short, and no one argued. The living side's floor wore its own winter coat. Rye, straw, bracken, river reeds, last autumn's leaves. Fresh layers went on top, while older ones sank, merging with kitchen scraps, and spilled ale. Rowan fed the floor, unknowingly speeding fermentation. Down in the dark, bacteria ate cellulose and exhaled a slow, steady heat that blunted the earth's icy bite. Spilled water no longer froze solid overnight. By Candlemas, the bedding reached Bram's knees. By March, it had transformed into rich, black mulch. Rowan forked it onto sledges, harvesting heat's ghost. He joked Dan spread it on the turnip rows, yielding roots so fat the bailiff cursed his own sterile soil. Yes, the aroma could peel paint, and fleas stage nightly crusades, but frostbite buried more folk than vermin ever did. Spiders spun silvery nets in smoky rafters. Rowan called them bug fishermen, allies in the itch war. The cottage, for all its pungency, functioned like a living organism. Clay lungs, ember heart, compost stomach, cattle blood. Break one organ, the rest suffered. Keep the cycle whole, and winter bowed. Picture dawn. Frost feathers the shutters, animals snort awake, and Maeve tiptoes over the straw to steal the warm spot by the hearth. Rowan brushes away the ash quilt. Embers bloom. Light skates along smoke, glossed rafters. Tyra ladles porridge, the steam mingling with breath clouds, while Bram feeds kindling to the newborn flame, proud apprentice to an art older than lords and laws. In that pocket of perpetual autumn, the family owns a warmth no smart thermostat can reproduce. So when someone flaunts a smart furnace, ask if it can milk itself, fertilize fields, and heat bedtime stories in a single burn. Until then, Rowan's ash dragons sleep undefeated, guarding the night with a glow money can't buy. Imagine curling up for the night, surrounded not by bricks and beams, but inside a steaming cocoon of rotting straw, sheep grease, and glowing river stones. It sounds like the start of a fever dream, but for Ewan and his brood, this was winter's finest luxury. They didn't sleep in a house, they nested inside a living, breathing biome of heat, bacteria, and human grit. At the heart of this biofortress lay thick bedding. Layers of old straw, crushed ferns, and moss formed into dense, spongy bunks. Topped with fresh stuffing, these makeshift beds soaked up warmth from the composting floor beneath like a sponge drinks water. It wasn't a mattress, it was a heat-retaining jungle. And in that nest of fermentation and flattened foliage, the family slept, safe from the deathly suck of the frozen ground outside. But when the house failed to hold the heat, the final line of defense wasn't fire or stone, it was skin, fabric, and the kind of stink you grow fond of. The clothing of a medieval farmer wasn't stitched for elegance, it was engineered for survival. For Ewan, his layers weren't an outfit, they were a mobile insulation chamber he rarely ever shed. And the secret wasn't bulk, it was strategy, clever layering, and a surprising embrace of dirt. Closest to the body was a long linen undertunic. Linen, unlike wool, didn't itch or irritate. It hugged the skin and wickered away sweat, creating a dry barrier. Over that came the prickly champions of warmth, homespun woolen tunics, sometimes too crafted from the fleece of grim, rain-hardened sheep. Each wool strand was twisted and coarse, trapping thousands of air pockets. It was the still air, not the fabric, that held in heat like a medieval vacuum flask. The real magic, however, came from what wasn't done. These wool garments were barely washed. Why? Because they retained their natural coating of lanolin, a waxy, greasy barrier that repelled rain and sealed warmth like a fat-soaked sponge. Ewan's outerwear smelled like a blend of barnyard and bonfire, but it was virtually waterproof, windproof, and warmer than any clean cloak you'd dare touch. This smoke-soaked sheep armor wasn't just worn during the day, they slept in it too. Boots came off, maybe the outermost cloak, but everything else stayed put. The clothes, already preheated by body warmth and firelight, acted as pajamas, duvet, and hot water bottle all in one. Still, even the bravest didn't want to plunge straight into a cold, damp bed. The body's shock was real cramps, trembles, and worse. So Ewan, ever the pragmatist, turned to tech, his ancestors' version of a battery, half-heated stones. But not just any rocks only, the chosen ones. Dense, flat river stones or slabs of soapstone were the favorites. They absorbed heat deeply, held onto it for hours, and didn't explode when fired. Each evening, these stones were tucked into the hot ash like treasure. Once heated through, Ewan would fish them out with carved wooden tongs, wrap them in thick cloth, and nestle them deep into the straw bed. 10 minutes later, the mattress was a warm cloud instead of a frozen plank. Some stones went straight to the feet, those poor icy toes needed rescuing. More advanced? Clay pots. Yes, you heard that right. Sturdy sealed jars filled with glowing embers and a pinch of ash made slow-burn space heaters. Safer than stones, they radiated heat for hours and could be tucked right beside a shivering child or elder. If you thought this was quaint, know this. No one froze on Ewan's watch. Still, warmth didn't only come from what you wore or where you slept. Sometimes it came from where you dug. In older villages, the smartest folks didn't build on the land, they built into it. These were the half-houses or earth homes, sunken slightly below ground like prehistoric hobbit holes. When done right, they were genius. Why? Because the earth, stubborn and slow, holds temperature like a massive thermal blanket. Beneath frostline, the soil remains a consistent 5 degrees Celsius no matter how the air outside shrieks. By digging down a meter or so before laying their floor, Ewan and his peers trapped that steady warmth and wrapped it around their homes. The wind could scream, the snow could bite, but that sunken foundation stayed stoically warm. Walls rising from within the pit were sheltered from gusts. Moisture levels stabilized. The cold couldn't sneak in from below. It was like pulling nature's own insulation over your shoulders. A smart design choice? Absolutely. But to the locals, it was more than clever, it was survival rooted in dirt. So next time your thermostat pings or your boiler groans, imagine Ewan in his wool, nestling beside a steaming cow and a stone wrapped in rags. His home stank of smoke, straw, and compost. It hissed and creaked and teemed with life, but he wasn't shivering, he was winning. He didn't have heating, he had harmony with heat. The gale howls like a pack of wolves, slamming against a cottage you can barely see yet inside. Ellen's baby sleeps without so much as a shiver. No hearth blazes, no glass insulates, so what invisible armor shields them? Prepare to meet the tricks that let a handful of farmers outsmart the Arctic breath itself. First, they let the earth swallow half their walls. By digging a broad pit a man's forearm deep, The builders sank the whole floor below the frost line. Down there, the soil never dips into knife-edge cold. It loafs around the cool, steady temperature of a root cellar. Wrapped in that subterranean hug, the cottage gave the cruelest wind nothing to claw. At its lower wall sat safely cushioned in damp, mild earth, shedding convective heat loss the way a seal sheds water. Squat and half-hidden, the house presented barely any surface for gales to bully, conserving every jot of warmth scraped together by fire, livestock, and bodies. But the villagers weren't fools. Even a semi-buried hut can leak heat like gossip if drafts get in, so each autumn they waged a siege on cracks and chinks. Creaking doors were lined inside with elephant-heavy cowhide. A curtain of felt turned the doorway into a two-stage airlock. Gaps between jamb and frame were stuffed with moss pounded flat and daubed with soot, sealing tighter than any iron latch. Windows few, mean, and no larger than a man's fist were double-shuttered and blanketed with stitched rabbit pelts. Up on the roof, the smoke hole was throttled with a slate slab whenever the blizzard roared, leaving only a slit so the dragons of the hearth could breathe without sucking winter inside. That was the easy part. The whole clan then marched around walls and floor looking for the tiniest drafts, daubing fresh clay and dung paste into every suspect hairline. A bale-sized chest or a broad oaken bench was shoved against the windward wall to serve as dead weight against the cold. Hunting and plugging leaks took days, but letting icy air slither under a bed could kill faster than hunger. The fortress was only as strong as its smallest gap. Still, no matter how tight the seals, a single hearth can't fight a deep freeze alone. The answer? People lots of them. Winter evenings, half the hamlet crammed into Rowan's biggest room. Grandmothers, toddlers, shepherd boys, the potter with his crooked grin. 15 bodies yield more heat than a blacksmith's forge. 100 human watts apiece, nearly 2 kilowatts of living fire when they huddled shoulder to shoulder. Breath raised humidity, skin radiated warmth, and laughter bounced off clay walls like an echoing stove. Spinning wheels whirred, tools were mended, gossip flew faster than sparks, and the atmosphere climbed from brisk to goose feather snug, all while burning just one stack of oak. Social heat came with social duty in a house short on fuel or nursing, a cough could count on extra blankets, a bowl of pottage, and the warmth of other people's shoulders. Mutual aid, elbow to elbow, proved mightier than any gadget. Alone you shivered, together you sweated. So ends the tale of mud-brained brilliance. Half-buried foundations, draft-slaying curtains, community gatherings that turned breath into central heating. Clay, straw, dung, cattle, and camaraderie formed a single closed circuit, each piece feeding heat back into the others. They didn't fight nature, they reasoned with it and won. If these old-world hacks spark your curiosity and you crave more lost survival wizardry, tap that like button and follow or subscribe the channel. The archives are bursting with forgotten genius just waiting to warm your imagination.